are live here to chat about all the TV that we didn't watch this week. Most importantly, the latest episode of Loki, which just came out in the last 24 hours. And I'm so excited to talk about this D&D campaign that masqueraded as a episode of television. We also have some other genre bending shows to discuss. Most importantly, Kevin can fuck himself. And I had to sit there, Kate had to sit there and listen to me before we went live. As I was like, do I censor that every time I say it? Because I kept hesitating every time where I was like, do I say it as Kevin can F himself or Kevin can fuck himself? And the reason why I ask is because they have to censor it on all social media. All of their social media handles are censored so that their tweets aren't getting taken. Anyways, so excited to talk about that. But first, Kate, hello. I hope you had a good holiday weekend. And also, do we have any news?
I bring zero news.
No news.
Have nothing. No news. I'm sure there is news. I don't know about it.
No news is good news. We had a lot of cancellation news the last couple weeks. In fact, some cancellation news still rolling in. I found out that the reason Good Girls was canceled, speaking of cancellation news, is because the lead male would not take a pay cut, even though the lead females had agreed to take a pay cut. He wouldn't agree to take a pay cut, so it got canceled. This is why you can't trust men. Even though I like the actor. Anyways, I don't really have any news that I'm bringing to the table either. Do you think we should jump right into the latest episode of Loki? You have watched it, right?
I just watched it an hour ago.
Literally same. Carrie in the chat says, language, Captain America style. Listen, Carrie, it's in the title of the show. I find it funny because it's okay, never mind. We're going to get into the title of Kevin Can F Himself later. I'm pleased with the structure of the title for reasons other than language. But first, let's dive into Loki. Carrie, I also want to know if you have watched the latest episode of Loki. But Kate, what would you rate the latest episode of Loki on a scale from 1 to 5?
1 to 5, a 4.5. It was pretty good.
You liked it? Okay.
Yeah. You did not like it?
No, I want to hear your thoughts first. I didn't hate it.
So, it's one of those things that it's not a show that I find fun to critique. Specifically, there are shows that there is a certain amount of joy of kind of poking fun at the problems. And don't get me wrong, this episode had problems. The fact that they kind of brought in all these different Loki characters, it wasn't distracting, but it was very obvious that they did that for the comic book fans. And there's probably thousands of comic book references made in this episode that most people like us will not get. What actually took me out of it the most was how long that scene in the beginning between the judge, whatever her name is, and Sylvie, how long they were trying to play this game of she's on Sylvie's side. I started to get to the point of me being, I take offense to how long you think I'm going to play dumb in this scenario. Because there was half a second where she said, she acted on this team, and I was I was that wrong last week? And then I was no, it's just that they want us to. So I didn't really like that, and I didn't love how many characters, how many Lokis they introduced, just to kind of drop it. I will say I understood what they were going for, and the storytelling aspect of showing the potential of a Loki to do evil, but then once they know that they can change, they want to. So you see that how different he is from the other Lokis, and then you see classic Loki in his final moments decide to sacrifice himself. that's like I understand what they're doing. I see it. Was it as thrilling as some of the other things that they've done previously? Not as much, but I could understand and I could appreciate it. Um, Honestly, I was okay with this episode being kind of very much like a Dungeons and Dragons game because of how cinematic it was. Like I
Mm-hmm.
am of the opinion that I shouldn't notice editing unless you're editing something very like in a way that you want to draw attention to how weird the framing is. So like the intro when they're upside down, they rotate around and smoke like you melt from one thing to the other. The editing was fantastic and
Mm-hmm.
it drew me like it drew attention to it. So while it was kind of like a I'll take it episode with the story and everything, the other elements and like some of the dialogue and other things really bolstered that for me to be like, okay, it was fine, it was good.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing at all. My rating would be pretty up there as well. I'd give it like a 4, maybe even 4.25. Here's my complaint. It's a dumb complaint. It's a me complaint, okay? Here there are so many things good about this episode. This episode feels like a movie, like a complete story. When I'm joking about it being like a D&D campaign, that's also kind of a backhanded compliment because it's a complete start to end story in one. They do world building within one episode, they do character introduction and exit within one episode, they do character development and romance and climactic battle and cinematic monsters and all of that within one episode. However, this was, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, this was the most high fantasy esque episode yet. The word no, that they've really been playing with like genre bending, not as much as WandaVision, but you have elements of buddy cop, you have elements of office drama, you have, the little animated clock thing, like they just have different characters in there that all feel like they're from different places, but they all come together. This episode, for the most part, despite some of those things making an appearance, mostly felt like a fantasy, like a high fantasy journey and battle. And that's just not my favorite genre. And here's why that it shouldn't knock the rating much because it was done very well. But the one thing that got to me there was a scene I really, really liked so far, which was the scene with him and Sylvie, because like of course, I'm predictable. I ship them. It was so cute. That scene with them and the
So
blanket.
shocked.
I know. We're all just shocked to find out. But that scene with them, with him and her with the blanket, it was very like tropey and good. I just loved it, and I was kind of like, I was kind of hoping something like that would show up in a less high fantasy environment. I might just be being picky here. I really should take the positives where I can. In the chat, Carrie says he hasn't watched the latest episode. He hasn't watched. Oh, he may be saying he hasn't watched the Kevin Can Fuck Himself show. But he loves what it's about. He did watch Loki. Okay, he did watch Loki. He's in love with the show. Carrie, I want to hear what you would rate this latest episode. Am I being too overly picky with it being kind of like a little bit more high fantasy? Or is the fact that we had like 3 TVA gods turn out to be robots even worse? Stormy says she doesn't have
I
Disney Plus, so sadly no Loki for her. And where can you watch Kevin Can F Himself? You can watch Kevin Can F Himself on AMC, which is, they have that channel on YouTube TV, for example. Okay. Am I being too picky about high fantasy? Go.
I understand where you're coming from. I just have a different opinion on it. So we're gonna go a little meta about how I'm gonna kind of play devil's advocate for this decision. Their romance in because it's now clearly a romance. You cannot
Mm-hmm.
argue it is. Um, in the realm of the established romances of Marvel, for the fact that they're all superheroes and stuff like that, they're all relatively grounded relationships. The most eccentric, I guess you could say, the most out of this world concept being WandaVision,
Right.
a witch and a robot, you know, uh, on that same scope, I think that the Sylvie Loki relationship would be the most like sci-fi. It's very much the concept of time travel and alternate realities and things like that. So I would argue just on that plane of it, it kind of makes sense to me that they would express their romantic moments in these high fantasy, high sci-fi scenarios and genres. On a more like metaphorical level too, they are both gods, and whether you're talking about like Norse mythology or just how like in the realm of Marvel and how you talk about Loki, um, the the Asgardian characters are very much like a mythical kind of like a style of character. They are very like they kind of have that fantasy vibe. A lot of fantasy is derived from Norse mythology anyway. Uh, so I would also say like they're I was fine with it. I thought it was great, and I think that those themes match. I understand that you don't because you don't like high fantasy, and that's perfectly fine. I just disagree with how you feel about it.
Yeah. We have such a similar rating. I'm looking at Carrie's rating in the chat. He says he gives this episode a 4.5 frog Thors out of 5. And he said he'd watch a series of Croaky, Crocodile Loki, and Fror, Frog Thor 2. I absolutely I would absolutely watch some sort of animated short about that. It was also really fun in this episode when we saw all of the different Lokis in costume. I was just thinking about like every con I go to this year, I'm sure I'm going to see a million different kinds of like Loki cosplay that is not just, standard Loki, which
Loki.
I think that's really fun.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this episode wasn't fun. I'm just, okay, I'll put it this way. You know how sometimes in a show they'll have like a special episode that's like the Halloween special or the Valentine's Day special or something like that, and it's
Or
just
the
like
musical.
right, or the musical or something that's just a little bit out there, that's almost like it's for fun, it's almost a standalone episode, whatever. And if you have a main ship on the show, you may not be rooting for them to like get together in that episode because it feels so separated from the rest of the show and it kind of feels like a one off or whatever. Or it feels like, oh, you don't want them to get together on the like kind of like the cheesy, the gang all goes up into space, whatever episode. You want them to get together in an episode in their quote unquote real world. And I guess this kind of like I would say maybe 20% triggered that for me. It's not exactly that situation. This doesn't feel truly like a standalone episode. This doesn't feel truly so far removed from their world because there is really no their world in this show. And it didn't really feel like cheesy or anything. It was just
I
borderline that. Just enough to knock off like 0.25 of a point. Like just enough to take it from 4.5 to 4.25 for me.
I get what you're saying. I kind of agree. Like this was very much more you did say this earlier, how this was far more just fantasy, where the other ones have been more of a mixture. I would argue that the episode where they were pretty much by themselves on that other planet was kind of like that too.
True.
However, the difference between those two episodes, you can't fully take this episode 5 out. But you could definitely take episode 5 out and put an additional scene in the front of episode 6 and explain, okay, this is how we've got here. Like, this is the time at the end of time. And now I think that this is where they are. We're going to go find them. And basically have edited like 1 or 2 scenes in to the front of episode 6 and get them to the same point that they are now.
Mm-hmm.
So on that scope, I don't think episode 5 added a whole lot to the general arc, other than basically kind of giving us hints and clues to more relationship stuff, both with like the judge and how she feels about the TVA and not knowing and stuff, and all that. So it was far more informative about relationships and dynamics rather than like us truly figuring out who is behind it. They could have easily taken out this monster guarding them and added like a little tiny bit, and it would have been just as sensical on that score. So I guess I agree on that level where as the other episode, you couldn't take that out. You needed that whole episode. But
yeah, I think you're right. I'm not going to disagree on that.
And maybe that's that, because that is, I enjoyed it, but I will say there was this feeling of like, what are we doing here? And I think that added to that level of like Dungeons and Dragons, like it felt like its own story, but I didn't quite understand, at least on the plot. I definitely saw like the character development of why we needed it, but on the plot line, I didn't quite understand why we were there. So for that aspect, I do agree with you that it felt a little out of place compared to other episodes.
Yeah. I wonder if this is not really unique to this episode, but it's more so that approximately every other episode or so will feel like a new world. Maybe we're early enough into this to where it feels somewhat standalone to me, but really every episode is somewhere new. You get maybe 2 episodes of some kind of consistency, but it's jumping world to world, timeline to timeline. Carrie says, Kate, do you still hold your Renslayer theory?
I'm going to make edits to that theory, but I'm not going to completely disavow that theory. That's why I was so like frustrated at the beginning, is I was like, why are you doing this? But then I was like, no. I still want to hold true to the idea that whoever is in charge saw Renslayer as like a pawn that they could use, she is very loyal to this agency that has very clearly lied to her, and she is still subservient to it. She is still fighting to keep it in a structure. So there is some amount of her feeling like this amount of like in debt or loyalty to whoever's running the TVA. She might not know who it is. I didn't necessarily think she did or didn't. But I thought that there was a special like servant style bond between Renslayer and whoever's actually in control. Whether that be she's their child or that she was the first variant, either one of those ideas are what kind of came to me. I did say I just finished watching that episode, so I haven't had tons of time to really come up with theories about her connection. But I don't think that anything in this episode really pushed me to believe that it couldn't be true.
Mm-hmm. Carrie also asked in the chat, isn't the next episode the last one? I thought there's 8 episodes. Is there only 6? I will look that up.
I thought there was 8. I can look it up.
Please stand by for technical assistance.
Now, I will say, if you've been paying a little bit of attention into like the conversation outside of it, you'll know that there's been an argument about how if Loki proves or disproves that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is part of the modern canon, And whether it is or isn't, the title of episode 5 was Journey into Mystery. Journey into Mystery was one of Jenna Simmons' first lines. I'm sorry, I just had to mention it.
The title of this episode was?
Yes, the title of episode 5 was into Mystery. And
Oh.
when in episode 1 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I don't know how I remember this, in episode
It
1, Jim
was.
is taking like the swab of Ward's mouth, and she's like, "Are you ready for our journey into mystery?"
Huh. When Gemma Simmons appears on Loki episode 6, then everyone will realize. Um, Carrie is correct. I just checked. Next episode is the last one, according to IMDb.
Huh. Okay.
That makes me
Do
kind
we
of
know if this is
depressed about the whole Loki. And so sorry, I'm like a one track person. Am I over focused on the
You're
romance?
fine. I understand it. I understand.
Absolutely. So it makes me kind of sad about the Loki Sylvie thing because, like, you know, romantic plot points as well as I do. And the fact that they had in the then episode before the final episode, their discussion of we're going to go through whatever, but maybe if we make it through, we can, you know, figure out the timeline together, you know, whatever it is, basically the tropey discussion of if we can make it through this one last thing, maybe we can make it through together. Now, if the couple that you're shipping says that before a big boss and makes it through that big boss, great, you're good. They're going to go through some more shit, whatever, but you're solid. If they say that before the final boss, one of them's going to die or disappear.
Yeah, but I don't think that was the big boss. I think that we shouldn't like abandon hope, because as like big and spectacular as that sequence was, that's not the big boss. The big boss is going to be the man behind the mask,
Right, but
when
like
they
they're
find
saying
whoever it
that in
is.
the second to last episode. Like it's too close to the end for them to say it. Like, let's say the storyline is this long, okay? This is the end. If they say it here in the middle, you're solid. It means they're going to go through much more than you could possibly imagine, much more than they know at that point, but they're going to make it through okay. But if this finale, if they say it right over here, very close, that means they're going to get broken up in the finale, probably by one of them dying or being erased. I just like some things you just know, like I don't know a lot. I don't know a lot about Marvel. I've ignored the names of most of this cast. Like, but I know that that kind of thing in the penultimate episode means an unhappy, unromantic ending. I would put so much money on it. It's not that I want that to happen. I very much don't want it to happen. I just now know that it will, based solely on the fact that it's 6 episodes instead of 8. Carrie says he doesn't ship Soki. He did want him to hug her when he first saw her in the void. The Mobius hug will have to do. Unpopular opinion, I don't like Mobius. But that's a story for another time, probably.
um, when you were going through that, I was really, at the first, I was really going to go, no, 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 I think it's fine. I was going to try to be hopeful about it, but I'm not. So I'm not that kind of person. Um, I mean, I could definitely make a theory or make an argument to like counter yours, but I wouldn't believe it. So now there's a fair argument to say like who doesn't make it with either one of them. Like it seems like she's already kind of had her character arc, but we've also already seen Tom Hiddleston's Loki for so long that maybe having somebody else take over Loki, like it's one of the like what both of those make sense to me. of who gets to get out, who gets to escape. But yeah, I don't see them either, both of them surviving this or both of them coming out happy together.
I think they might both, like, even if they both survive, one of them will, like, metaphorically die from a plot perspective. Like, they will be infinitely separated into one of multiple timelines, or one of them will be, like, somehow reset, or he'll agree to give up, blah, 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 and never see her again. Bishop, can you stop causing destruction on this whole world? Sorry, my cat is a menace.
Okay.
One of them's going to metaphorically die. Like, what that means in this world, I don't know. But, or betray the other.
So
Carrie's shocked that I don't like Mobius. Do you like Mobius?
I like Mobius, but that's not shocking to me that you don't.
Okay, fair. We'll take it.
Um, so I had a thought while
Okay.
you were talking about that. So we know, yet again, I'm going to do it again. Ready? Multiverse of Madness. It's coming up.
Right.
It's going to mainly focus around Wanda, Doctor Strange, and I've heard probably Loki. My guess now is on the Loki side of that storyline is it will focus around Loki, the heartbroken fool that he is, going around the timeline trying to find Sylvie.
Love to see
So
it.
Wanda is going to be looking for her kids lost in the timeline. He's going to be looking for Sylvie lost in the timeline. Doctor Strange is just going to be there and it's going to be named after him. That's what that movie is going to be for me. I've decided.
That sounds accurate. Like, I can't argue with that. And it would probably allow them to bring in Sylvie without making them center a female Loki on the big screen, because I feel like Disney wouldn't do that. As for why I don't like Mobius, okay, so here's the thing. I feel like people don't have to justify liking or disliking a character. Like, sometimes you dislike a character for like a dumb, petty reason. The shape of their smile. You don't like a shirt they wore once, like whatever. And I feel like that's okay because it's fictional. So I'm not going to articulate well why I don't like Mobius, much in the same way I didn't articulate well how I know that Loki and Sylvie aren't going to end happily. I just know, and this time next week we will have seen that. But with Mobius, there's a couple things I dislike. Number one, I don't like the trope that he fills. I don't like, number two is, I don't like that he shifts alliances too easily. I don't like the way he acts when he tries to act, I want to say like submissive. He's either faking submissive and he's double crossing everyone, and that's just like part of his trick, in which case, like, he's a bad guy. So, like, I'm rooting against him because I'm assuming he's not on Sylvie's side
Wouldn't
and that
that
she's.
be
What now?
wouldn't that be the greatest plot twist? You find out that Mobius is the bad guy, like Mobius created the TVA all along.
It would be a good
Okay,
plot twist.
continue.
Nobody's
That
read
would be
his
a
mind.
fantastic.
Nobody's read his mind to prove otherwise. I guess it's just like, I see him as extremely submissive. And there's two ways to view that. Either he's submissive in an annoying way that makes me distrust him because he's too shifty in his alliances, both with and against Loki. That's one option. That option makes him a good guy. It's just not a good guy that I trust. It's not a good guy that I like. I dislike what he stands for. If he was going to switch to be on Loki's side, I needed more from him to be convinced by that. Or he's a bad guy. He has not switched alliance. He's faking being submissive. And then I don't like the type of bad guy that he is. I think it's the first, based on his interactions with other TVA employees, but ultimately, whether or not he is bad in any kind of ethical stance. And for me, I view bad from like an alignment perspective. I am aligned to Sylvie in this. So her enemies are my enemies, right? So like she may be bad, she may be a villain, and if that is the case, then the good guys are the bad guys. So you see what I'm saying? That's just the framework I'm working in here.
Yeah,
But whether or not he is bad, as in opposed to her or not, or in any way referent to her in the grand scheme of things, he's not a character that I like. And I can't make him likable in my head by convincing myself he's a double agent. Because in scenarios wherein he's a double agent, I still don't like that. Does that make sense?
that makes sense. I get it. I don't have the same hang up with him being the double agent. I don't think that's where they'll go, but it is a possibility. Clearly, I mean, like he's pointed out, nobody's read his mind. It is possible. I am on the side of, as a character, and as a character that he's arguably, like, he's pretty essential in this show. He's not like a three-dimensional character,
Yeah.
and normally that would bother me. Normally that would drive me crazy for how much screen time he has and how two-dimensional he is. Because all he really is he's a guy that like follows what he's been told, and he likes jet skis from the 90s. Like that's a big portion of what we know about Mobius. The argument against you, or like the argument for him, I guess, is basically he's kind of like this uh, puppet, like this representation of all general TVA agents that have not been corrupted, that they're just variants, that they have varying levels of trust of various people. He just happened to trust Loki, which is a questionable choice, but that is something he did. Um, but as a character, he doesn't really stand for anything specific other than like, I've been told I'm doing good things. I want to help humanity. Like, my job as a TVA agent helps humanity. And then the revelation that he doesn't, and like him, like piecing together that the TVA is not the good guys,
Mm-hmm.
his reversion to working with Loki makes sense to me. It's not the most three dimensional. It doesn't seem to me like subservient, but it or submissive. But to me, it just seems kind of like two dimensional.
Yeah.
Like it's not super interesting or well developed in the sense of like I we don't know truly his backstory as to why he would do that. That does kind of feed into the possibility that he is double crossing them, but it's all kind of one of those things like there's not enough for him there to for me to really like love him. The reason I like his character is he's kind of the this weird like mirror for the Loki humor to bounce off of, and I just find it funny. I've not seen a ton of things that Owen Wilson's done, but the things I have seen him in, I just find him funny. So that's a really big part of it is that I just find the personality that he does have to be like, humorous, and it is kind of a spoof or a little bit of a making fun of the 90s persona, which is something that like I'm not a 90s person. I don't like the 90s, so the idea of making fun of the 90s is kind of funny to me. Um, but that's more of how I see it. It's less like he's my favorite character, Sylvie's my favorite character, closely followed by Loki. I know we're all shocked and surprised. Um, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, there's really only three developed like characters in. We have Sylvie, Loki, and Renslayer. Those are the three characters.
Right.
Everybody else is just kind of like place fillers that are acting.
You know who Mobius reminds me of? Poe from episode 8 of Star Wars, where he can mess things up or make things work, but ultimately he's kind of just ineffective, supposed to be charming, and I'm the only person annoyed by him, and everybody else was watching and falling in love with him and thinking he
You
was
know,
funny and cute or whatever.
yeah, you have a point there. Like because he is in our focus, it feels like he is a more important character. But in the scheme of active parties, he doesn't really have that much power. So we're being told. If you go across as them, it's different. But if we're leading what they're telling us, um, he doesn't really have any power to prevent evil or enact evil, whether he's on the TVA or Loki's side. Um, but because he's kind of like this facial representation of the TVA and Loki's interaction with it, we're like, oh, he's so important, and really he's not. He's just
Here,
fun.
so here's what we're gonna do because it's 8:40 and I want us to have a few minutes to talk about what else we watched this week. But I also want us to have time to talk about what we think will come next. So what is next for Loki in the apparent season finale next week? So I'm going to pitch to you why you should watch Kevin Can Fuck Himself, whatever it's called. And then you can go through what else you watched and read this week, and then we will wrap up with our predictions for Loki next week. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay. Listen. Recall WandaVision. How
Yes,
you
familiar.
might recall WandaVision. I don't know. Recall how in WandaVision it was very genre bending, where to the point where one episode was a, I Love Lucy show, one episode was a Modern Family sitcom, et cetera, right? And kind of poked fun at like the dark parts of that. That's what Kevin Can Fuck Himself does. So the show is like a show within a show. When you first start watching it, when I first started watching it, I nearly quit after 30 seconds because I thought it was a sitcom with a laugh track. Like you're sitting there watching what appears to be the opening of a sitcom in some sort of lower middle class house. I think it's actually supposed to be like low class, but whatever. I'm trying to be, let's not get into the details. You're supposed to be looking at this like it opens the way Friends or Everybody Loves Raymond or like honestly kind of like Modern Family a little bit, but that almost got to the point where it was like blending a few different kinds. What are some of the other ones in that general genre? Maybe even like Home Improvement or something like that, where you always have Everybody Loves Raymond might be the best example, where you always have this like dorky, funny husband and then this really uptight wife who is the one who has to like come out and like bring him food while he and his buddies are like talking about the game. And he's got some zany new adventure of like, oh, there's a chili cooking contest this week, or oh, I'm getting my prize jersey that I bid on this week or whatever. And then she's kind of like coming in and being the fun killer. That kind of show. The genre, right? So it opens and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it was this kind of show. Listen, I love Annie from whatever her name is, from Schitt's Creek, but like a little bit Alexis is not what this is. Like, anyways, so I almost quit, but it changes. So what it actually is this show that like subverts that genre, and it will cut away from the sitcom and be a drama where they move away from that. The laugh track drops off, the studio lighting drops off, all of that drops off. And it's from her perspective, and she fucking hates him. And the whole show is about her preparing to kill him. She is plotting his murder in a not funny way. It's not a dramedy in any way. Like it's not a dramedy. It is a drama and a sitcom. And the sitcom is only like maybe like 10-15% of the show. Like they have sitcom scenes spliced in throughout, but they have a really brilliant way of doing it. Like it's most of the sitcom scenes are when her husband's present. He is everything I hate in these sitcom men. And I have for the longest time hated sitcom men. Okay. Like I hate the funny sitcom dad who's like just another grown up kid doofus who does nothing and makes his wife feel like a buzzkill. I have wanted to kill them all for decades, and this show thrills me. You've heard me talk about how much like I even don't like Phil Dunphy, and he's probably the best of the sitcom dads, but he was always my least favorite on Modern Family. This show is fantastic. It is therapeutic. It is well acted. It is led by a fabulous actress, and you will be able to see as you watch it all of the themes throughout that are so targeted to your interests and mine, and watch it. I believe there are 5
So,
episodes out thus far.
so this is my narrator's entrance to kind of inform people. A few weeks ago, Cammie tweeted at me saying, tweeted a Tumblr excerpt saying, "Did Kate Johnson write this?" And it was the zaniest, like, Regency parody commentary on that genre, and it very much screamed me. This has Cammie written all over it to the point of it being like, are we sure she didn't hold the writers hostage and say, this is what you have to write? You have the writing credits to get this sold, but I am the ghostwriter. I have written it. You must make it.
It literally is what I would write in a show. Like it is therapeutic to watch it because there's a lot of things that I hate in TV. And most of the time when I hate a thing, everybody else hates it too. I just might be like a little over the top or more passionate about it. Or there'll be something I'll like and somebody might like it too, but they don't like it as much as me, whatever. But my absolute visceral disdain for sitcom men, sitcom dads specifically, and like this isn't like some sort of like I do not have a sitcom dad. This isn't some sort of personal issue. This is a pure fictional vendetta, okay? This comes from the purest part of my heart. I want them all dead, okay? I'm thrilled by this show with every fiber of my being. Watch it. It's so good. Can't wait for her to kill him.
I think you might just like it just a little bit.
Listen, Kate, the level of like, okay, so obviously they have people like me that they don't have to convince me to dislike this guy. I disliked him within the first 30 minutes, the first 30 seconds. I was ready to stop watching the show because he was alive, present, speaking. Like, I knew instantly from watching it, this is a character I was going to hate, right? And thus I'm thrilled that like he's on the path to death, I hope. But like, I'm just thrilled that this show is like going out of its way to make sure everybody else sees all the flaws in this type of character. I'm so thrilled. On the edge of my seat, I watched like 4 episodes in a day during a week where I like barely had any time to watch television. Granted, it was in the background while I was like getting other stuff done. Still productive, don't worry. It's so good. You're gonna love it. Carrie says Cammie is a ghostwriter. Follow the money. Shh, don't give away my secrets. Kate, what else did you watch this week?
So I did not watch any other shows. I did not have a chance to watch the 3rd episode of the Mr. Benedict Society. I'm excited to watch it. Can't wait. However, I did have 20 minutes to watch and I have seen it before, but I doubt I've mentioned it to you, and I feel like I just need to bring this joy into the world. There's an edit of John Mulaney jokes and like stand-up cut in between the 2005 Pride and Prejudice. And I like John Mulaney, but there is a certain, like, there's an uncanny amount of just jokes he's made that perfectly fit every situation in Pride and Prejudice. So they have re-edited the entire movie for him to do like voiceovers or little cut-ins to give his own little 2 cents about what's going on. And it brings me utter delight.
I have not seen this and I really want to, so I will go Google
I will send
that.
it to you.
Please do. That will be thrilling. I will watch that in the 20-minute workout that I should always try to get in after the live show. Okay, well, let's close this out with our theories for what is going to happen from here with Loki in the season finale. Carrie has entered his predictions in the chat. He says, "What's next is a Loki sacrifice." And I speed watched the latest Flash episode. I was merely whelmed. Carrie, listen, last week's Flash episode was so off putting to me. I literally didn't watch this one's live or before this show at all. Like, this is the beginning of me. This is the beginning of my descent. Like, this is the beginning of my distance from Flash. I'm gonna watch it, but like, this is the beginning of my distance. Kate, it was literally so bad.
I'm so proud of you.
I don't
I'm
know
so proud
what
of you.
I don't know what happened but there was like this whole okay, so they've had this whole sequence where they've tried to convince us that Barry and Iris are fucking and trying to create a child. Okay. It's not good. It's worse. Whatever you're imagining, it's worse. It's worse than that. And involves no physical contact between them, which is the only good thing, because I don't want to see Barry get it on with anybody, to be honest. Yeah, I don't even want to see him get it on in any ships that I would be down for with him. Okay, so they had this whole episode where Iris finds out she's pregnant and then doesn't find out she's pregnant. She's not in the episode. And I don't know what happened. And I think it was like for COVID reasons, or I guess she was like alluding to having some sort of like meltdown from herself on social media. So I don't know if there was like some kind of like behind the scenes situation that kept her from it, but they very clearly had to do these weird last minute edits where all of his conversations with her were one-sided phone calls. Like, we're not even like hearing her voice on the other end or anything like that, where you kind of patched it together. It was just the weirdest low budget. Like, it really gave me like watching a high school play vibe. You know what I mean? You know, when you're like watching a high school play and it's like kind of bad and they really had to kind of edit around some things and somebody forgot their line and tech didn't turn on somebody's mic, so you're hearing things one-sided. Like, it was that bad. This was not CW bad. This was like way beyond CW bad. And it really like, I feel like of anybody, I've been the one watching this where I'm the most distanced from the show. Like, I'm still watching it for like petty reasons or the sheer bit of enjoyment I get from like one or two characters. This was one where I'm like, I'm at, this is what it actually feels like to be distanced watching the show. So I did not watch it, but I will. Maybe they'll pull me back in. I really wanted to watch it with like a more present, better attitude because this one has David Ramsey in it. So
Yeah, you're gonna have to explain to me why David Ramsey is just in every single CW show right now, because I do know he's in like all of them, and I'm just so confused. I know he's gonna be
because
in the next episode of Superman, but he's not. As far as I know, he doesn't have a Green Lantern show lined up, does he?
they don't have a Green Lantern show lined up. I don't think they know what they're doing with this franchise yet, but like moving on from here, which is why they're kind of just like renewing everything and starting nothing new and trying to, see what's still sticking post COVID. But he is probably like the most loved, best received character that they have that they could still bring on. So I think they're just trying to capitalize on that and use him to like inject a little bit of life into some of their dying shows. Not that Superman and Lois is dying by any means, but just giving it like a mid-season life boost, I think is what they're doing with him. I don't mind that he's
Okay.
on there. I saw some complaints about like some of the things they sort of like make him say, and like unsurprisingly, he has to like sit there and give Barry the like big boy pep talk of like, you're fine, you're such a good boy. Who's a good boy? You're a good boy. Like, they have him do that to like puppy dog Barry, which like gag, but we knew that was going to happen anyways. Carrie says Diggle was in this episode, which is why I was at least whelmed. Yeah, I I'll watch it with a good attitude when I can bring myself to have a good attitude. Probably in the
Yeah.
next couple days. Where do we go from here, Kate? Does
So
Loki sacrifice himself for himself?
I had a different picture of what was going to happen because I thought there was 8 episodes,
Same.
but because there's not 8 episodes. Generally speaking, they're going to find man behind mask. We're going to find out that he has been controlling Renslayer. Yeah, got that. Um, we're going to find out some other layer of insidious behavior. Cool. To stop him and to still save themselves, it's going to seem like Loki, our Loki, is going to sacrifice himself. And in the last moments, because Sylvie's never had friends or family, and she's all alone and she doesn't know how, she's going to prove that she's learned how, and she's going to sacrifice herself. And then, in his guilt and in his loss of his love, that's where we're going to see our Loki in Multiverse of Madness. That is my guess. Alex, stop the clock.
I think you're probably right. Consider the clock stopped. That sounds like the ending they built up to. I would only add, this is an and, not an or, to your theory, based on the fact that we have been conditioned to really buy into the fact that this is Loki and another version of Loki, and he loves her, which is somewhat metaphorical for him learning to love himself and her the same. I think I have fully bought into, as a, 30 minutes ago or whatever, when I realized that there's only 6 episodes, I fully bought into the fact that we are going to have an unhappy ending between them romantically. They will be separated, as in one of them, like, metaphorically dies for the purpose of the story, permanently or not. What I don't think is, I don't think it will be one of them sacrifices themselves for the other. I think it's going to be this like mutual self-sacrifice. Since they are both the same, I think they will both sacrifice themselves. One of them will end up in one planet, one of them will end up in another, or they'll end up in separate timelines, or whatever the case may be. But them learning to love themselves and then thus loving each other should kind of persist so long as one of them is alive. And I think my cat, I hello Bishop, thank you so much for your presence here today. I think that that will be how they create like a sad but happy romantic ending, that like the love for each other can exist even if only one of them is still there. Does that make sense? Because they are both
Yeah,
each other.
I get it.
It'll be some savvy thing. And
Yeah,
it won't satisfy me because I want both of them to like live happily ever after, and that won't happen. But Bishop, you're not gonna throw my pixel
basically
buds
what
on the ground for the 14th time.
we're basically in agreement though that whatever happens in the next episode, um, Multiverse of Madness has a lot of power over us. It has the power to absolutely devastate us in both ways. Either emotional devastation of just fantastic writing and we're emotionally satisfied, if not weeping our eyes out in the theater, or deprive us of every like storyline that we have wanted, and us just sit there in our own anger. That's what's going to happen. And you know, that's really what's coming up next.
That's right. Everybody give me a
Yeah.
round of applause for not talking about Too Hot to Handle or The Bachelorette this week, despite the fact that both had very dramatic episodes released, including Too Hot to Handle's finale and The Bachelorette bringing in the guy that I'm rooting for. We will save that for a less interesting week once Loki has completed its madness. But
Uh-huh.
I will see you same time, same place next week, where we will be talking about how Loki and Sylvie did not get their happy ending. much to my dismay.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.